In the tapestry of life, where every thread holds a story, America in Black and White emerges as a haven for the voices echoing through the heart of our communities. In this podcast, we wade through the rivers of our collective experiences, celebrating the vibrant hues of change brought forth by the whispers of hope and the roars of action. It's more than just a conversation. It's a journey into the heart of our society, illuminated by the light of those daring to dream and do. Join us, and let your voice be the melody that guides us toward a dawn where every color finds its place in the masterpiece of our shared destiny. Together, let's paint a future brimming with the positives that dwell in our minds and the actions that shape.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of America in Black and White, where we are coloring conversations on the canvas of America. Tonight we have a very special guest. We've got Colonel Dwayne A. Whiteside is our guest tonight. Colonel Dwayne A. Whiteside was born in Greensboro, North Carolina, and enlisted in the Marine Corps in 1980. He attended North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University, where he graduated with a BA degree in political science in May of 1983. Following graduation, he augmented to active duty and served as an infantryman in 2D Battalion, 2D Marines from August 1983 to March of 1986. In March of 1986, he transformed to Marine Corps Security Force Company's RAF St. Martin, United Kingdom, where he served as a sergeant of the Guard from March 1986 to June of 88. He returned to Camp Lejeune and was assigned to 3D Battalion, 6 Marines from June 1988 to September 90, where he deployed to Panama in support of Operation Just Cause. In September 1990, Colonel Whiteside was selected for the enlisted commissioning program and was commissioned as a second lieutenant on December 8th of 1990. He was assigned to 3D Marine Division in 92. This assignment included duties as an engineer platoon commander, company executive officer, and assistant logistics officer. He also served as a 3D Marine Division AD camp and worked for both Major General Ray L. Smith and Major General David F. Bice. Following this tour, he transferred to Quantico and served as a staff platoon commander and engineer instructor at the basic school. Completing this assignment in 1998, he transferred to the engineer officer advanced course in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. In August of 98, he was assigned to 8th Engineer Support Battalion, where he served as commanding officer for both Bridge Company and Engineer Support Company. During this tour, he participated in Operation Mitch, humanitarian assistance operation in Honduras, and was selected to brief President Bill Clinton. In June of 2000, he was promoted to major and transferred to the Engineer Center of Excellence, where he served as commanding officer of the Engineer Instruction Company. Upon completion of this tour in June of 2002, he transferred to U.S. Army Command and General Staff College. Upon graduation of CGSC in June of 2003, he transferred to 3D Marine Aircraft Wing and served as Wing Engineer Officer and Marine Wing Support Group, 37 Operations Officer. While at 3D MAW, he served 2 tours in Iraq. In July 2006, he was promoted to Lieutenant Colonel and transferred to Atlanta, where he served as Executive Officer and Associate Professor of Naval Science for the Atlanta Region NROTC. In March 2008, Colonel Whiteside was selected to command Marine Corps Security Force Battalion in Kings Bay, Georgia. Upon completing this assignment in July 2010, he was assigned to U.S. Naval Forces Central Command in Bahrain, where he served as Marine Expeditionary Unit Planner and Deputy Director of exercises, strategy, and plans in 5. On 10 July 2012, he assumed command of Combat Logistics Regiment 2 and was promoted to his current rank. On 1 November 2012, in February 2013, he deployed to Afghanistan in support of OEF 13.1 13.2. In July 2014, he transferred to the Joint Staff and was assigned to the J4, where he served as a division chief of the Capabilities Analysis Division and Supply Division. On 20 July 16, he transferred to Headquarters Marine Corps and served as branch head for the Logistics Program Engineer, EOD branch and plans, Operations branch. In June of 2019, he transferred to the Council of Review Boards and is currently serving on the Physical Evaluation Board. Along with his degree from North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University, Colonel Whiteside holds a Master's of Science degree in Education from Kansas State University. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to bring to the show Colonel Dwayne A. Whiteside. Welcome to the show, sir.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for having me, Mr. King. That was a lot of reading right there.
Yeah, you got an extensive bio here, so that's a lot of work that you put in, and that's well done.
That's 41 years, 4 months, and 15 days worth. So,
wow.
and I wasn't counting, okay? But
Okay.
that's how much it was. But yeah, I retired actually just to finish off on that. I was at the Navy Yard. And that's where I went to the Physical Evaluation Board. But then I retired from there because COVID hit. They asked me to extend. That's why I ended up staying a little bit longer. And I retired in 2021, October 2021.
Oh, wow. That's a long time.
I'll tell you what. You know what? When I joined for 3 years. That was it. I said, okay, I'll get a country. I can do 3 years, get a country 3 years. And then that 3, they dangled England in front of my face.
Okay.
And I was like, whoa, England. And then I started thinking about Paris. I had gotten married, and I'm thinking, man, I got a free honeymoon here, And so that got me 3 more years. Now I was up to 6. Then I came back, then I was at 10, and then, you making that decision, going, wait, 10 more, I could retire with 50%. And then, it just goes on, and I got in the officer program, and it just continued. So it wasn't intentional, is what I'm saying.
Well, those were under the old contracts, because when I was in the Navy, I went in under an old contract, which was the 4x4s. Now they do them totally different.
Right, yeah.
And so, once you fulfilled your contract, you was good to go. But now I'm not sure exactly how they do that. I think they do something like that 3-2 or something. I don't know exactly how that works.
Right, yeah. Because you had like the 4 active duty and the 4 reserve.
Yes.
And then if you want to, you can go on actually individual ready reserve. Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Yes. So as we jump into the show, the one thing that there's several things about about your resume and the things that you've done that really stick out. But what I want to start with is pretty much something that resonates with an issue we have here in America today, and that is leadership. And I want you to tell us about, what does leadership mean to you, and how has your understanding of it evolved throughout your career?
Well, leadership, when I was teaching down in Atlanta, I taught over at Morehouse and Spelman, Atlanta University, and Georgia Tech. But, I would tell them leadership is about being able to influence a group of people towards a shared purpose. Now you got to think, now, how do you influence them towards a shared purpose? And then we used to talk about your different powers. You have the positional authority, where I can tell you what to do and you're going to do it, or whatever like that. But what it really came down to is that reverent power. That power where you earn the trust and respect of the individuals. And
Yes.
if you want to stimulate or you want to motivate somebody, they have to first know you care. And you
Mhm.
have to learn how to not let your position be more important than the people that you have to lead. And you have to trust that. I'm gonna tell you, it's 41 years into the day I left, I was still massaging and hard on myself and all those things, trying to ensure and to develop what I felt was effective leadership. Because you
Mhm.
know what, it comes down to how do you become where you're not selfish and how
Right.
you have courage. It
Right.
takes courage. Leadership takes courage to tell somebody something that they don't want to hear.
Mhm.
Leadership takes courage to not want to take credit for something when someone else deserved the credit.
Mhm.
You know, to go in front of the boss and say they did it. You know, if you want to give somebody credit, sir, they did it. They
Right.
brought the idea. And all
Mhm.
those things take a lot when you invest it into a career where you go, this could be all about me, but it's
Mhm.
not all about you. So I would say leadership is really when they talk about a servant leader,
Right.
it's about it's about learning how to wash those feet. It's about learning how to motivate somebody. It's about teaching someone to be your replacement. It's
Mhm.
about unselfishness. It's about understanding that the legacy you leave is the life you live. It's about that. And it's tough.
And so, like with our platform, this platform is all about, we target the underserved and marginalized communities because we want to build those communities. When we talk about leadership in the form of what you just mentioned, what are some of the things that people in those communities can actually take from, just the things you do or the things as you define leadership? What can they take from that and how can they use it?
Well, as you know, it's interesting because I came from Greensboro, North Carolina. I
Mhm.
came out of that community. My dad used to tell me, he said he was so poor he had to look up to see the bottom. So you know what I mean? And there was times where they would fix us a sandwich. We thought everything was good, and they were like cutting off the little edges around the bread so they could make them a little mini sandwich. You know,
Right.
so so it was, but the one thing that he was thinking is the same thing we're talking about now. What can I do to make it better for them?
Right.
How can I put them in a better situation? And
Mhm.
so he ensured from that, never graduating from high school, even
Mhm.
that every one of his kids graduated from college.
Wow.
I mean, every one of them, two brothers and a sister, and three of us are Aggies. And
Mhm.
my brother, he jumped ship and went out there to another college, but we forgave him. But anyway, but I would say this: when I was in Atlanta, which
Mhm.
really amazed me,
Mhm.
I was the XO, and we had a scholarship for where we were trying to recruit minorities
Mhm.
because we wanted diversity.
Right.
We wanted the services. We felt that they are effective when you have the collective mind in the military.
Right.
Because everyone looks at a problem from a different perspective, and you need those different perspectives if you want to be totally effective. That's what we believed.
Mhm.
So we had that scholarship, and as the XO, I could I could take and find a kid who was qualified. If they were qualified, could write it up, send it down to Navy headquarters, and boom, I could have it without having to go through a long process.
Mhm.
But when I went out and started hitting the street to find the students, I was really surprised at the fact that I thought that they lived like me.
Mhm.
Because at that point now I'm an officer, pretty much middle class. And I
Mhm.
went out and I said, hey, look, you're smart. I just need you to get on your computer tonight, fill this paperwork out. And they looked at me and were going, what computer? And I was thinking, like, you know what I mean? Think about it the way you probably live. You probably have 3 laptops sitting in your closet right now. you know, because, oh, well, now I want a 5G, I want a 2 terabyte or whatever, and got a new one. And
Mhm.
these kids were looking at me going, what? So I said, well, what about the, so they had to go to the library or somewhere,
Mhm.
and it just wasn't dawning on me. I recruited one girl, was outstanding. She was a who's who, a United States who's who academically and athletically. And she was living in a car, and they were parked in a Walmart parking lot.
Oh my God.
And it was like, is this real?
Mhm.
you know, and she was still achieving. So to answer your question is, once again, selflessness to get out there. And it taught me, see, then it taught me a lesson about selflessness from observing it, because then I understood everyone is not the same. Everyone doesn't have the same advantages, but they had superior skills. But the
Mhm.
skills couldn't get to the table unless you go out and you actually do care and you go out to find them.
Right. Right.
And that is part of, where we were going. Now
Mhm.
I'm praying that we don't lose that and we continue to go there,
Right.
because we gained so much talent by doing that. It was just unbelievable going into those schools and going into situations like that. I'll give you one more example. I had a young man in his church. They contacted me. Hey, we got this good kid. He's really talented. He had the grades, he had the scores, he had everything. And so I was like, all right, yeah, let me check him out. So I sent the recruiter out to his house to talk to him.
Mhm.
And so the recruiter kept driving up and down the street, and he finally called me. He said, hey, I'm looking for the address. I can't find this kid's house. And so then he stopped and he asked somebody. He said, yeah, you just passed it. He went back. The house was so old. It was in rural Georgia, so old and ragged. He thought it was a shack.
Oh wow.
He said when they opened the front door, you could see the trees outside in the backyard,
Oh man.
And I mean, I'm talking about the old school, like when I used to go to my grandmother's house in the country, where you go to the bathroom, you got to go out there and find the outhouse kind of house.
Yes.
And so we got all the paperwork done, had the kid come in, and he had enlisted in the Navy. And
Mhm.
so having gotten getting him the officer scholarship and having to come to school, I could overrule the enlistment.
Mhm.
So his church contacted me and said, hey, look, before you do that, let him finish, because at least now we know he has some food and he has somewhere to go.
Right.
So I waited till he finished boot camp. He was up in Michigan or somewhere, Illinois. But when he finished, we brought him in, and when we showed up, he had no clothes or anything. He had what he had on his back.
Mm.
And once again, talented. So I'm saying that, going back to what you're saying, it's out there.
Mhm.
But sometimes you got to get on the ground and you got to go out there and find it. You have to
Oh
find
yeah.
it. And for those who are out there, is to understand there are opportunities. Now, I
Mhm.
know the opportunities might be getting a little bit scarce now. It's not like, when we were like really beating the bushes to find them,
Mhm.
but connecting the opportunities with the talent
Mhm.
was kind of the challenge,
Right.
because you don't know what you don't know. I didn't know.
Right.
If it wouldn't have been for, somebody saying, hey, there's a thing called an officer program where they come, because face it, some of those recruiters don't feel comfortable coming to certain locations. And with
Right.
me going to HBCU, some of the recruiters may not have felt comfortable coming on to HBCU if they didn't grow up and understood what it was.
Right. Right. Yeah, and so like I know that in the underserved and marginalized communities, I understand how there's a lot of divisiveness and so forth. But I think for those that are actually trying to do some things to put something together in order to have some peace, have an environment that's really conducive to living and wanting to be where they are, which is what, again, that's part of what our platform is. And my thing is, I just want those that, especially listening to you tonight, as we're talking about leadership, is like, what do some of those people do in order to let people know that they are leading or they are leadership caliber? What are some of the things that they should do in order for people to, to take heed and follow?
Yeah. You know, a lot of it I see too, depending on their vision,
Okay.
is there's opportunities out there. What I saw, and I'll give you an example of leadership. There's
Mhm.
like STEM programs with the Navy, the Naval Research Laboratory. And then
Mhm.
they had a whole separate branch where they were trying to go into HBCUs or underrepresented communities. Didn't have to necessarily just be a HBCU. You know,
Mhm.
there's other underrepresented communities. And when I retired, I started a business. And one of the first contracts I got was working for the Naval Office of Small Business, where they were
Mhm.
trying to do just what you're saying, an outreach.
Mhm.
And I called up all the HBCUs or whatever, and then got with the different departments that the Navy had that was looking, we're doing this outreach. And I'm going to tell you, I was amazed. The
Mhm.
disconnect in the individuals knowing about it and the
Mhm.
disconnect of the folks who are supposed to go out and find the individuals.
Mm.
And then I'm gonna tell you now, this is the one that hurt me. I'm gonna tell you, this one hurt me the most.
Mhm.
So one day I was sitting in the meeting and I was listening to them talk,
Mhm.
and I heard one of them say, "Well, we can't find anyone when we go there who's really qualified." And I'm thinking, well, where are you going?
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? Where are you going? Because I can go and so to answer that question from the other side, and then I go back, is also having the right people who look,
Mhm.
who has the empathy, the drive, the compassion, and to understand the differences in different communities. And for
Mhm.
those students, going back to for the individuals, is for the individuals, whatever they do is to understand there are opportunities. This,
Right.
regardless of what this government or this country says, they're going to need leadership in the future if we're going to compete with the world. That's that's
Exactly.
that's that's just the bottom line. You're going to need talent to compete with the world, and it's going to be the whole rainbow of talent, color of talent, the people of talent, the personalities of talent, all of it is going to be required to be able to do it.
Mm.
So, the one thing is not to give up and know that there are opportunities out there. And then here's the other thing. When you hit the wall or you get disappointed, understand, don't get bitter, but get better for
Mhm.
yourself. I'm not talking about to impress somebody else because this should all be for you. Don't
Mhm.
get bitter about it. Get better for yourself. Keep making yourself the best you can be.
Mhm.
And I always share this with my sons and some of the guys I mentor. You know, when Jesus was talking to his disciples, he told them, he said, "In this world, you
Mhm.
will have troubles." He said, "You will have tribulations. You will. There is that you don't know what a good time is when you never had a bad time.
That is true.
You won't know what victory is sometime if you never felt some failures.
Mhm.
And then you don't know how those things are the things that launched you." And
Mhm.
I'll just share this with you. And I know I'm getting roll on the roll, but when I was a young enlisted guy,
Mhm.
my wife was having our first child, and I was
Mhm.
in the infantry. and we were getting into that conflict with Panama, where we were going to go down and deal with Noriega. And
Yes.
so my wife was having some complications with her pregnancy. But back in that day, you had to be strong. You couldn't say any, you had to, it was this representation, Marine infantry guy, I can't go in there and say something to my first sergeant. And so it was bugging me. I said, well, you know what? I'm not asking to get out of it. It's because we have a rotation going on. If he could switch me to this group that's getting ready to go, when they rotate back would be my wife's due date. So that's all I wanted to do.
Mhm.
Just switch rotations, not get out of it, but just switch rotations. Then the guy would go during the time I originally had, and he'll leave at that time, and then we'll be good. And so
Right.
I went in to talk to my first sergeant. I said to him, I said, hey, first sergeant, my wife, they're saying she has some complications. He said, hey, Whiteside, you don't want to go down like that. You don't want to go down like, as though, you trying to get out of something. He didn't even listen to what I was saying. I said, no, you don't want to go. And immediately I stopped, because that's the way we were taught. You're in the Navy, you taught then the
Right.
chief say something, you go ahead and walk away and keep on rowing, right? But I
Yeah.
tell that to say, and going back to what we're saying about those young people who, how do you get to where you want to go? I took that right then and I said, one day I'm going to be in power where I'm going to be able to make that decision. I looked around at all of them. I
Mhm.
said, everything they're doing, I can do it. So in other words,
Mhm.
that tribulation made me say, I'm going to get to where they are. And when I get to where they are, I'm going to bring the empathy and compassion I think you should have in a situation like that. And no
Mhm.
kidding, it wasn't even a year later, I got selected to go to officers candidate school.
Oh
I went to
wow.
officer candidate school, and guess who now was the boss of this guy?
Oh Lord. So now he got to
Yeah.
answer
So
to
now,
you.
but now let's go even further. Then we deployed to Afghanistan. Then I'm the colonel, and I get, God blessed me to be in charge of thousands, right? We had a
Right.
young man and he had a problem at home that was similar to mine, and they were like, well, we don't know. And guess what I got to say? Send him home right now.
Mhm.
So,
Wow. And so, and those are just then, as you say, now that was had to be a very fortunate opportunity for that young man.
but going to the full circle of what we're talking about with leadership and earning respect and doing the right thing because
Mhm.
it's the right thing, and the
Yes.
tribulations that you go through. Some things you go through is
Mhm.
preparing you for that moment. Like I said, for that moment to be able to reflect and say, I can sympathize exactly what he's going through and how he's feeling and how his family is feeling. And he shouldn't have to feel that way. He should feel that we are supporting, we're not throwing obstacles. But
Right.
going back to your question, though, the thing is to understand, to put blinders sometime on the now to be able to see your vision and your future. So you can look
Mhm.
out and think further and believe that you can do it.
Right. So, can you share a specific experience that taught you a valuable lesson about leadership?
Well, that was one, but
Mhm.
this is another one. Is about be angry, but don't sin in your angry. Anger is an emotion, but always keep your
Mhm.
emotion or try to under control. And because they say it's better to have self-control than to take a great city, right? And I
Exactly.
was down in Honduras, and I felt like the commander was treating me unfairly. And I
Mm-hmm.
had went, and you know how you start talking to yourself. And man, I had pumped myself up in my head at that time. I think I was a captain, and I pumped I'm going to go and I'm going to say something. You know what I mean? I've had it, and I'm going to go in here and
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say something. And then,
Mm-hmm.
right as I got one on one with him, where we were together, it was just like this calmness came over me, and I didn't do it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't do it. But I
Mm-hmm.
say that to say, in that moment, that decision would have had the far reaching implications of my entire career. So,
Mm-hmm.
by allowing anger to trigger me to the point where I would have gotten out of who I was. So
Right.
that was like one of those where I walked away and I said, okay, do I please the flesh, which wanted to go old school? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Or
sir.
or do I submit to something greater than that? Yeah,
Right.
but yeah, that even though it wasn't like it was some great thing that happened out of it, but it was like a personal lesson to me, you know, and it just and then after that, guess what? I ended up getting a
Mm.
award from it, you know, and all kinds of, you know, and then didn't lose the respect of the men and women that I was leading.
Oh wow. See, that's
That's
always a
it.
good
I
thing.
mean, right then, I mean, I could have got relieved or could have lost the respect of, you know, so many people, which was more important for them than it was for me.
Right. Um, how do you define success in your role as a leader?
Yeah, you know, and that's a really good one, because I mean, that's one that I used to sit around when I was a young guy and would talk to my aunt, and she would look, she was, man, you young to be thinking like about that kind of stuff. But you know, as I look back, the greatest success I have, I feel to myself now, is that I was able to learn to just be consistent. You know, I never, I mean,
Mhm.
and I thank God for this, that I learned to be consistent. Just the guys who met me as a lieutenant thought they were talking to the same guy when I was a colonel. You know, it was
Mhm.
no difference. You know what I mean? It's just, and so to me, success then is to see them get promoted and continue to be successful and then come back to you and say, you know, how much you impacted their life and how much they
Right.
knew that you really cared. You know, not just some,
Mhm.
you know, just using them for your progression, but them coming back and saying that they really know and they felt that you cared and you were steady with that. You were consistent with it. And I think the biggest thing there for me for success, that was it. Because I'm gonna tell you something too. When it's over, it's
Mhm.
over. It's like when I talk
Right.
to guys who know me now and they see me, I'm
Mhm.
like, Colonel is a nickname. When you, it's a nickname. When you're gone, you're gone. You know what I'm saying? No
Mhm.
one's coming over and looking for and take charge of some kind of a mission or whatever it is. You're a guy who just sitting at home, and the only thing going for you is whatever you left, the fingerprints that you left on people to want to reach out to you, want to know how you're doing, want to be around you, want to go and fellowship with you or whatever it is. That's your success then, because the uniform comes
Yeah.
off. And I think a lot of
Mhm.
times we don't realize that, I don't care, even if you get caught up for 40 years, the uniform's coming off. And you have to be you.
Yep.
That's who really defines you. You. Not that uniform. There's a lot of senior officers, senior enlisted out here. And guess what? They go to Walmart. Some young guy pull right out in front of them. Hey, old man, get out of the way. You know. So,
So, in your opinion, what are the most important qualities of an effective leader?
you know, and I think this is a big one right now. Is you we talked about before. You have to care. You have to have compassion. You have to have character. Character does still matter. I know I hear guys say, well, no, character still matter. When we were in the military, just like when you were in the Navy, what would we say? We say if somebody got caught doing something a little shady, but they got away with it, we'll say, don't worry about it. If they lack character, it's going to come out.
Mhm.
And guess what?
Most
And
certainly
it will
does.
come out.
Yes, it will.
And let's
Yes.
and face it, it's going to be, and they're all things, there are going to be temptations to do things that's not right and all that good. But you got to define to yourself, who are you? And that quality
Mhm.
is you have to, number one, you got to really push yourself to care about people. You got to have that compassion.
And
You have to.
as you
Mhm.
mentioned that about character, because that is important. And we know that if you've got character, and that means then you've got sympathy, you've got empathy, you've got ethics, you got those things that let you know that you've got a caring thing about yourself. Now, for those people that have that, and let's just say there's an issue with learning to assert themselves in order to elevate. What are some of the things that they should do, or you think that they should do in order to elevate themselves?
I mean, and that's when I was talking earlier, this is what I was getting to. That is the internal
Hmm.
battle right there. Because
Yes.
you're in a system that is based off performance. It's based off
Yep.
accountability, and now the big word is meritocracy. But the bottom line is based off of supposedly performance and all of those things. So now you
Mhm.
have that dilemma. Do you make it about yourself only and always trying to be in the limelight? Or do you understand sharing the limelight and sharing the success of the team as being the accomplishment? Or and then you're going to get in that dilemma to go, okay, but how does that affect me getting to the top? Because the more I can represent myself as being the one, the smartest guy, smartest person in the room, the one with all the courage, to everything else that helps my stock go up. But what I think happens in an organization where you do have people with character, they also can recognize
Mhm.
character. And,
Okay.
and that's how you continue. But now let's get to the world of reality. There's always going to be
Hmm.
a percentage of careerists, people who care only
Hmm.
about career, only care about looking good and saying the right things. And they're going to also rise too. They're going to
Yeah.
rise too. It almost go back to that biblical thing about you got to let the wheat and the tare all grow together. I mean, all of it's going to grow together. God said he reigns on the
Mhm.
just as well as the unjust.
Right.
So, the bottom line there is you got to think about who you are when you walk away from it. And I'm going to tell you, it is a battle. I struggle, and I'll be personal, I'll be transparent with you. I struggle with courage in the sense of not courage to go run at the enemy, but the courage of sometimes having to say certain things. The courage of coming
Hmm.
out of growing up in the South, where when I
Hmm.
grew up, we were already militarized. When we left that house,
Okay.
Your neighbors needed to know where you were going. Your parents knew where you were going. Everybody knew where you were going. And they were like, hey, where are you
Right.
going? Uh, Make sure we all know. Your neighbors are watching you. Make sure you don't say this. Make sure you don't say that. Uh, there was a lot of things that we had to do to make sure, you weren't going to get in trouble. Now, imagine coming
Right.
into the military and you've been conditioned like that, and you have to try to get beyond not upsetting the system. That was
Mm.
for me, the
Yeah.
conditioning to going back to what I was saying, being the challenge of the courage to say certain things in certain environments. And I'll be honest with you, most of everywhere I went, I was usually the only one. So now you come out,
Mm.
you're the only one, and you have to be able to speak out. So it was,
Mm.
that part was a challenge.
Well, I do get that, but and my thing is, I think I can understand, the point that you're making about maybe just learn how to balance, the whole entire situation in asserting yourself. But I think just depending upon, I think the Navy, well, I do know the Navy is much different than what it would be like to be in the Marine Corps or the Army, because basically those two branches kind of like are one and the same. The mutual exclusiveness is just there for the natural assertiveness of what just had to get done and what they were trained to do. Like in the Navy, if if and being a sailor, if we were like half as assertive as the soldiers were in the Army or the Marine Corps, that wouldn't fly. So you don't go into the Navy or even the Air Force if you don't have that ability to communicate in a way that's going to what do you want to call it? To what people hate today, call it PC. Okay,
Yeah,
you do that naturally, but there also comes that time that there have been times, because I know that I can say that um I've stepped in it a few times where I just had to let it be known, I'm sorry. I can't keep playing sugarcoating things with a lot of folk when you see it as much as I do. That is not accountability.
right. Hmm.
That is not accountability. And so leading, sometimes I know that when you lead, you want to make sure that you try to, again, as you talk about having that balance. But when you have that balance, sometimes there's just a lot of things that that balance just primarily, it has to be upset. You have to upset the
Yeah.
balance sometimes, but you just have to know when to do that.
And,
And so I think that's about the environment.
and you're right. I mean, and that's what I mean about the struggle, is to understand
Mhm.
just what you're saying, because, you know, there were times I would be in, like even in the Pentagon with another guy who looked like me. And I would have a senior officer, and I was a senior officer. I mean, as a colonel with another colonel, and we're talking business, and say a general officer, a flag officer walk up, and you know what they would say? They would say, "What are you guys doing? Break it up."
But
It, it, and so you see what I'm saying about it. So for us, it was like it was complex in trying to negotiate some of that. Sometimes it was like, okay, two senior guys talking in one of the largest office buildings in the world, who are responsible for a lot of serious stuff. And the
Right.
concept was, so now we're trying to dig our way out of getting beyond that because, like I said, I'm an older guy. I came up when it was put it this way. I went to A&T. A&T was the
Right.
city guys in Woolworths, and I'm from
Oh,
Greensboro. So I'm saying, and I was born in 61. So it's nothing to me. At 68,
oh,
Martin Luther King getting assassinated, Kennedy, you know what I mean? Actually living and breathing. So then now you have to take and try to change that old adapting to something else. Where you also see where a system that had adapt to a perception also that needed to change.
mhm.
Just like him saying, "Hey, what are you guys doing? Break it up." I've even had guys say, "Hey, what are you guys? Are y'all scheming?" You know what? So what I'm saying is, and I'm not trying, but I'm saying that was the complex part of trying to go, okay, now in that, I got to find me. You know what I mean? I have to
Right.
find me. And I can't just be the me who disappears in the background because if I do, then once again, now you're not involved. You're not you. You're not getting to the table. And that's what I would tell all the
Right.
young guys I would mentor. I say, if there's a table, you get to that table and you be at the table and you be ready to say something at that table. And if you don't have a chair at that
Yes.
table, go to Walmart or Roses and buy you a folding chair and take it and put it at the table. But you need to be there
Yes.
and you need to be willing. And then as
Yes.
the generations have changed, you need to not take my baggage. And that's what I try not to do with
Right.
my two sons is not give them my baggage. My parents and all of them, they did what they had to do during that time frame. Now I got to make
Mhm.
sure that I don't restrict my kids and being that way in a different time frame. So,
Right.
it's kind of funny. My dad, if he had a nice car and he'd go to work, he had to park his car around the block from the place he worked at. So, so
Why
they
is
couldn't
that?
see that he had a nice car. And then if
Okay.
they saw him in the
Okay.
car, he would say it was his grandfather's car, his uncle's car. So what I'm
Mhm.
saying is that's how deep the programming of what they had to overcome, to and so in that arming us, and then what some of us had to overcome in that generation, my generation of what I'm saying is to be able to push through, to be able to make sure that we're no kidding relevant because we want to be relevant for the next generation of everyone and in the way everyone would even perceive who we are because we're talented.
Yes. So, how do you motivate your team, especially during challenging times?
You know how? It's to listen to them.
Mm.
And then when you listen to them and they have a good idea, you act on the idea. You don't just say you're listening.
Mhm.
And when I would when I was at the Pentagon, I would bring my team together in the office and I would say, okay, if one person could do this, what we are required to do and achieve, I said I could send every one of you home and I'd be the only one here doing it. And I say, we'll save a lot of money. You're talking about efficiency and effectiveness. Man, I could have saved the government a lot of money. But guess what? One person can't do it. And I used to tell them, I said, the reason all of us here is because we all make up that one brain that's required to get whatever it is that we have to do done. And that was it. And I'll tell you, one time when I was deployed to Afghanistan, and we had a dicey situation that was going on, and it was late at night, and we were trying to work our way through it. And I had this one young female lieutenant, and she said, Why don't we do X, Y, and Z? And maybe we can do this and we can bring them into this and we do that. And I looked at her and I said, that's a good idea. That's what we're doing. I'm gone. You see what I'm saying? And I intentionally did that to say, I
Mhm.
have confidence in what you just came up with. So,
Mhm.
and then, and I mean, and she just lost her mind because she, oh God, they taking my idea. No, you came to the table with the best idea. Now, can we accept that that best idea came from there? And so then many more ideas have come about. But yeah, that's what I mean. Sometimes you're not the smartest person in the room. And you shouldn't think that you have to be the smartest person in the room. You have to be the one who understand and bring the wisdom, knowledge, and understanding to the table to listen to all of it, to understand when it's a good or when it's a bad. And you are always an instructor and a teacher. As a leader, you should be prepared to be an instructor and a teacher and try to ask the right questions. Not just ask a question, but
Yes.
try to ask the right question. And then that's how you just, to me, that's how you keep it going.
Let's transition over to entrepreneurship and tell us what inspired you to explore entrepreneurship alongside your military career.
Well, you know, it wasn't intentional. It was when I
Mhm.
retired, uh, I was at home and I'm telling you, and I was like, okay, that's it. I'm 100% retiring. And then I had a guy who I worked with at the Pentagon. And he was working with a company that was working with the Navy Office of Small Business Programs. They had a contract with him. And so he called me and said, man, you can't retire and just, you can't do it, man. He was really saying, after all the experience and the stuff that you've done, well, nothing like how you're so good, but it's just like, well, God has blessed you to be involved in so much stuff. And
Mhm.
and so he just kept going and he would call back again. And then he said, well, okay, I tell you what, we want to bring you on as a 1099, and we want you to do that outreach where they outreach to underrepresented communities, for also small
Mhm.
business programs and go to the colleges and present it to the colleges and try to bring it together. And then, right then he hooked me. Because, of course, a HBCU guy, and all that good stuff. So when he said that, then I said, well, then just being a 1090, why don't you just start your own LLC? You've taught leadership. I taught it when I was in Atlanta, and you've lived a whole life of leadership. This is what you've done your whole, entire, most of your life. So I decided to start the Whiteside Group, LLC. Then I went through a
Mhm.
bunch of classes, of course, learned how to write a capability statement, started going to different governmental organizations, outreaches, to NASA, to all the different places, and just start really reaching out to them and writing proposals. And believe it or not, my youngest son, the guy's really a good writer, so he became my proposal writer, and we did it, and we got a few contracts. We got a contract with the VA. Wasn't in leadership. It surprised me, but it was doing, computer training and stuff, which also I was into the education thing. But and so really that's what got me out there and really thinking. And then you had organizations that would really help you. You had the Minority Business Development Agency, with SBA, and you had all these other resources that would help you, your local resources that you could get to. And but I'm gonna tell you what I learned. There was a lot of work. That wasn't,
Yes.
and there was a lot of work for some no results from it. Writing all
Yes.
those proposals and reading all those solicitations and a few times getting burned, and all that, and a lot of little money up front or whatever it was. But I think what it wasn't so much about the success of getting any of that. To me, I go back to, I think it was about me. And what I mean by that, I was getting to the point where I would have my glasses like this and be looking for them. Hey, where my glasses at? And I think it was it was just to say, you need to keep moving and thinking. You need to keep going.
Mhm.
And then over the past year, I've been working down at Quantico for the Marine Corps um, Center for Lessons Learned, doing that as a contracting. But that was the biggest, that's kind of what got me. And it wasn't like some big desire where I say, I want to be my own boss, and that. But now as I look back and I see guys who are getting out, I do encourage them to say, hey, you ought to think about this. You bring a lot to the table. But I think the challenge now is everybody is kind of confused on where we're going. What's happening. Do they even put out solicitations anymore?
Yeah, they're kind of like they're not as much as they used to be. They're very, very sparse because there's all that nepotism that's going on. So the little bit that's out there, the few crumbs that's out there, you got to fight to get some of them
Yeah,
crumbs.
you have to have endurance. Yeah, you do.
Can you share an entrepreneurial venture you have pursued and what you learned from it?
Well, it was a couple of them that I did where, but the largest one was it was a leadership package for the Air Force.
Mm.
And it came out, and once again, now I'm like in elementary school, just a little bit above kindergarten. So,
Okay.
like I say, my son, we're doing this stuff together. He's writing the solicitations. And what I learned from that venture was how you had to build a team.
Mhm.
When I looked at their solicitation and what they were asking for, general officers, they want this kind of training. For their senior enlisted, they wanted this. And they wanted you to get on the phone and give them one-on-one mentoring and counseling, once a month and all of that. And so what it taught me then was, okay, who do I know? So it went from, once again, I went back to the concept of you don't have to be the smartest one in the room. Now it's about who do you know and who you reach out to. And then went back to what we talked about before. Not only who do you know with character? Who do
Yes.
you know that you can trust when it comes to money?
Mhm.
Because when you start putting money into a mix too, there's it gets a little bit wiry after you
Mhm.
do that. So
Ooh, tell
then,
me about it.
that was the big one. So I had to I reach out and what skill does this person have? And I knew them and I said, okay, I know they're good at this. They can do X. This guy is a retired general. I need a general on the team with us. Okay, I got two other colonels over here. I got this colonel. Let me look at all their backgrounds. The backgrounds are solid. They sound good. I can put all of that in our solicitation, and really, that was the biggest lesson. And then we made it through each step of the evaluation. So then that was exciting because it was like, whoa, we're making it to the final review, you know. So, but then somebody gave
Mhm.
a unrealistic price that I believe was unrealistic for what they were asking, and they went with the lowest offer. Yeah, which
Oh
I'll kind
wow.
of.
Well, they say, with a lot of folks I know that when it comes to that bidding process, a lot of people will intentionally underbid, but not underbid so low, but underbid enough to where they do win
Yeah.
bids like that.
And I was surprised because I mean we weren't like we weren't going outrageous or anything. I thought it was actually pretty reasonable.
Right. Mhm. How do you balance the demands of entrepreneurship with your responsibilities as a leader in the
Well,
military?
actually, like I said earlier, and I should have did what I told you and updated that resume, but now, I'm retired. So I'm retired 100%. There's no conflict of interest or anything like that. So I don't have a problem with that. And really what you learn and the people that you've had connections with through that, it really all becomes a plus. You know what I mean? It becomes a plus in the sense of getting into. But here's the thing. There's and I don't say this to discourage anybody from doing anything like that, but there's thousands of us out there too. And usually with a senior military guy, the one thing that he's more attracted to is probably going to be leadership. Leadership
Yes.
development, management, leadership, your knack is going to be 6'6", whatever was related to leadership. and And so then you learn a quick lesson right there about thinking about other things that you can pivot. And that goes back to that team thing again. And we kind of pivoted a little bit towards computer, IT, and some of those things. And that was because my sons were into that IT world. And then actually knew other folks that were into the IT world. And then it was kind of using me more so of being a service disabled veteran owned small business owner, so that could help get into the door on somebody who may not have had that certification.
Mhm. So, what challenges have you faced as an entrepreneur, and how did you overcome them?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is not just rolling up the flag and just quitting. You know what I mean? And and
Right.
honestly, I think that's where a lot of folks might be right now, because like what you're saying, the opportunities are getting very slim. For now, and then you have to ask
Mhm.
yourself, okay, do I want to continue to do this? Do I want to continue to pay that money, to keep my business solvent or whatever it is? Do I want to keep writing and looking for solicitations every week? And all those kind of things. Do you want to keep doing those networking? And then even with some of the government agencies, if you're trying to do it with government, I'm sure there's other ways to do it, but
Right.
if you're trying to do it with that, a lot of them are kind of confused right now on things before where they were looking like we'll say my capability statement start off as minority owned service disabled veteran small business. Now I get to go back and rethink it to go,
Yep.
okay, do I need to take minority off of here? You know what I'm saying? So
Mhm. But yeah, see, but as you say that though, I think once you start to learn about, especially that particular process, I think you have to have the stick to itiveness as to where you are in order for this to work. So, in other words, as you saying that word when you use minority, a lot of us don't use that term because they feel like it's a stigma. Stigma or not, when they see you, you're a minority. So, I think having that, to add to that capability statement makes it that much more impressive. I'll just put it to you like that. Because when I got a chance to do my capability statement, and for all the things that I reach out that I can do, I had the capabilities of doing. I felt really proud about it. I'm still proud about it, but I also know that because there's that expansiveness, because they say pick as many NAICS codes that's relative to your business. So you could pick them all, you could put them there, you can have that capability, but because you have that capability, depending upon who's doing the reviewing, It's gonna say, not this
Right.
time. So you get that letter in the mail stating, oh, well, this is what happened, and this is how we saw this, and next time try to add this or whatever have you. Just some little cake stuff to say, okay, well, we saw you, we see you, but we ain't seeing you right now to
Right.
bring you in.
That's it.
So, but that's how the game is played. But still, in all, it doesn't take away from the people that want to be entrepreneurs. And I think, again, as we're speaking to you, and I had another colonel that was from the Air Force that was on the show, and pretty much we were pretty much along the
Right.
same lines as where you are right now. And what we were talking about there is that again, you could clearly tell the difference in the branches of service. But for those that ain't been in the military, they wouldn't know what we're talking about. But you could clearly see the difference in the branches because like how you're talking about the way you guys had to operate between your Army and Marine Corps services. His was a little different in the Air Force, and what I experienced in the Navy was a little bit different. The thing is, when people see military, this is why they think of Army and Marine Corps, is because you guys are the get it done group. You know understand what I'm saying? So it's like there's an advantage to that, but I don't think a lot of people see that or understand it. There's an advantage to that. And that's why I think, as I have you on the show tonight and talking about your experience, is why I want the people out in the audience to actually get an understanding, that, we have so many different ways that we have to do things or approach things, but to not give up and to not quit is
Right.
where you got to be.
You got to have the endurance.
You got to keep going.
Yeah.
How do you identify opportunities for entrepreneurial growth within your community?
Thing that for me, was kind of like the same thing with the military. You have to get with someone who has more experience than you have. They constantly, look for somebody. You get used to you being the mentor. Now you have to look for some mentors. You have to look for opportunities for you to grow yourself in terms of knowledge and understanding and all those things. And that's what I started seeing. Because I just jumped right in, and in the beginning it just seemed kind of, well, okay, the guy contacted me. I didn't have to do any work. They contacted me. I jumped into it. And after that, I had to start looking for someone who's already done it, who's already gone through that period that you just talked about, of not getting discouraged and giving up, and have built the business and have, know how to size it, know how to bring it down, and know how to reach out to other people and all of that. So that was the big thing for me, is to start looking at it and go, okay, I need to reach out and start talking to somebody who can actually start telling me how to run a business, what to expect,
Mhm.
and to start thinking about, because you got to understand too, it wasn't a business for me or entrepreneurship based on money. So it wasn't like,
Mhm.
because it was like, I'm retired. You know what I mean? I was retired, pretty much. I mean, I was at the point where I could be retired too, you know. So it wasn't like that money part of it was the driving force. Really, in the beginning, it was the purpose. Like I was saying, when they got me in by talking about the underrepresented and the and all of that good stuff, because it was similar to what I was saying to you before when I was down in Georgia at Morehouse and all of those, doing it for the scholarships. So it reminded me of that same feeling that I had before when I was doing that. And that kind of brought me
Mhm.
into it that way. But then I had to go back. Like I said, it started off with it's going to be leadership thing. All three of the contracts that we got after that first one of outreach was all IT. Nothing to do with. Yeah, it was
Oh,
like I
wow.
said, my son taught the VA. They wanted instruction on Microsoft applications and all that, and my sons did it. We did it all remote. And then, of course, when you do it, then another one
Mhm.
come out and you apply. Now they kind of know you. You get that. And then the Virginia National Guard, then they wanted that same type of training, which we went and did in person. And once again, it was but not anything to do with leadership. And really, for me, I don't know anything about IT, really. So the only thing I was kind of the face and the guy who had experience to talk to people, to be able to go there and like before the session would open up, I would be the guy who would kind of talk to them. Hey, this is what we want to focus on. We want your success out of this, and do the elevator speech, and talk to whoever the main contracting officer is. That was my role. But an actual application of it, not a major player.
Let's move over to community advocacy. Why is community advocacy important to you, and how did you become involved in it?
Well, and I think it goes back to where you come from. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
going and like I told you, where growing up. And I'll use example like HBCUs back during the time when I went to college. And community, once again, the word community and community advocacy.
Mhm.
Even at
Mhm.
Morehouse, and this was years later, I'll go over to those guys. Morehouse, and
Mhm.
that's a renowned institution. I mean, that Spelman, Morehouse, those guys very respected. I mean, it was honor being there
Mhm.
with all that history. But do you know that they had a program in the summer that if you didn't have the back then, if you didn't have the math scores, or you weren't strong in math, you weren't strong in English or any of that, they would bring those students in the summertime and take them through a course. And if they passed and went through that course and did everything they needed to do, then that would give them another opportunity to be able to apply and to be accepted.
Oh,
And it was
wow.
just like, okay, this is a college that don't need to do that. You know what I mean? You can sell off of your name,
Mhm.
but it still had that original intent of trying to give everyone an opportunity. Now, going back to my
Mhm.
school, North Carolina A&T. North Carolina A&T, you back in those days, you could almost have a SAT that didn't even register. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It could be like they got a blank paper and you got two on it, you know. But they would bring you
Mhm.
in the summertime, just like what Morehouse would do, and they would take you through math, take you through some science, take you through. And if you went through that summer school and you did that, then what they would do was they would build your schedule where they would take it slow and build you up and would have a plan that you would be able to graduate, even if took more than 4 years, but to get you through community. The idea of you being
Yeah.
able to have a college degree, you know, no kid from a
Yes.
university that's accredited, you know, and that's what it was
Mhm.
community. And going back to that, so the thing that was instilled in me, as a young person,
Mhm.
understanding that these schools are starting in like basements of churches, or community had to keep them going because they were underfunded by the states, and all of those kind of things, but they still survived. And it was like being in a family. It was like being at a college, but in a family at the same time. And so all of that.
Mm.
in that whole spirit. And you and I know good, I know you can relate to this, because all I got to do is get you in church on a Sunday, and it doesn't matter what part of the United States, what happens if they start those old hymns. Everybody know how
Oh,
to
you
stomp
look
the
at you.
feet to the same one, right? And they
Yep, you
all
got
get
that
it.
right.
They
You
can
got
do that
that right.
whole melody thing if you sing 8 different ones, right? And what I'm saying,
Yeah.
and so what I'm saying is that was instilled in me. And then being
Yeah.
instilled in me, you take that who you are with you. And I'm gonna tell you, and I think that
Mhm.
was is a lot of the intangible part of people who didn't come that way. When they go, it's something about you. It's so, you know, and I don't mean like me, but it's so, y'all, you feel like you got something, you know. And I'll give you an example of this too. And when I was deployed to Afghanistan, they would have church services there.
Mhm.
And so they had a gospel church service they would have. And even the British, we had some British and they're African descent British, they would come over to the service or whatever. So we had a chaplain. And at that time, this chaplain was a white chaplain. And then we had another guy who was a ordained minister. So he would let him preach. The chaplain had to be present, though. You know, that's the way it is military. You were in the military. But one day he came to
Mhm.
me before he was leaving, and he got up and he spoke. And he was just like, I can't quite put my finger on it. I don't understand it. He's like, when you guys have church and do this, it's like you believe God is right here with you. It's like you touching him or reaching, and it's like he's here. And that's what I'm trying to say to you. He was trying to explain it, and that's what I'm saying. It's like the
Right.
experience kind of make you a community person, and make you
Right.
kind of that advocate of, because like I said, when I was growing up, it didn't matter who it was in the community. If they saw me and they saw I was in need of doing something I wasn't supposed to do, there could be correction. But it was in the
Yes.
sense of love, you know. And
Mhm.
so
That's truth. That's truth to be told, because then the community, which was the village, is what raised the child. Somewhere after that time frame of all that good stuff was going on, something happened. Now it's not that way,
yeah,
and that is
yeah,
a problem.
that's it is.
So, how do you address the unique needs of your community in your advocacy work?
You know, and, and I'm gonna just have to be honest with you. I look at it as a privilege and an opportunity. And I know, kid, and I get down and I pray about it, and I say, God, give me an opportunity, because uh, I've always been, one time I was walking through the Pentagon and I asked God, I said, God, who am I to you? He said, you're an encourager. That's what he put on my heart. Then I went to Romans 12 and start reading, and he's talked about how everybody's been given a gift, and one of them was encouragement. I said, okay, so that's now I understand why my leadership style is that way. Because on all my fitness reports, it will read like that. So I say that to say, what I when I go out, I look for an opportunity to feel like I made that person feel better about themselves.
Mhm.
To go out, and I mean, no kidding, that has been my joy right now. That's what I intentionally, I mean, and I'm intentional to go. I don't need a church for this. I don't need walls. I don't need to even take my Bible with me, because the best sermon is the life you live. That's the best. The best witness is the love you show,
Right.
because love never fails.
Yeah.
And so the thing that I get excited about, and in terms of the community, is go out there and just be willing to listen. And when you listen, to tell the person how valuable they are, how
Mhm.
unique they are. You're fearfully and wonderfully made. You're unique. You're special. And it doesn't matter where you are now, because where you are now is not where you may be in the future. And I tell you, that is the part that excites me. And I tell you, I was at a Target one day, and there was a guy sitting out there, and I was like, oh, okay, here we go. And I was like, all right, you can give him. So what? If he goes and gets something else with the $2, it's $2. But I went over to do this, and you know what?
Mm.
He wasn't interested in the money. He wanted somebody who would talk and listen to him.
Mm.
And it just like it was like a light bulb. I stood there and I'm like in the end, almost having to grab his hand to put some money on it in his hand. He
Mm.
just he wanted connection with people. And that's when I realized people are created for people.
Right.
That's our mission. And I think about, what I believe it say, the fields are ripe, but the workers are few.
Mhm.
And can you have a grace, going back to leadership, grace, because part of that leadership is grace too.
Mhm.
Understanding we're going to all make mistakes.
Mhm.
Okay. When they make that mistake, can you look at the law? Can you look at accountability and figure out how to leverage balanced discipline in there, where you can also have grace in there, and you can have mercy in there, and you
Mhm.
can keep someone going. And
Mhm.
and really, that's my vision, and that's my concept, and that's my how do I do with the community is right there. You know?
So, we do Black History 365. And I ask you, who were the most influential people in your life and your career? And one of I think so your parents was one of them, but I think you said there was Bice Senior and Bice Junior.
Yeah, and I was saying Benjamin O. Davis
Okay. Yes.
Senior and Junior, and because they were groundbreakers. I
Okay.
mean, think about it. They came in. I think the senior was born in like 1875 or somewhere around there, and
Okay.
he was the first brigadier general, brigadier general in the army, the first to get selected. So now
Mhm.
imagine the perseverance and all the things that you would have to be able to accomplish that. And he was from DC, right here, you know, right up
Mhm.
here in this area, right over there. I think on went to M Street High School,
Oh
uh,
wow.
but but he came through the system, did what he had to do to get an education, and then had, like I said, had the perseverance to be able to be black in the army. Then his son, he instilled the values and character that we discussed earlier in his son, and his son became the first black one star in the Air Force.
Mhm.
And when he passed, he was a 4 star. I think President Bill Clinton or Obama promoted him to 4 star, even though it was, of course, he was out of the military. But the point is, and he was one of the Tuskegee Airmen.
Oh wow.
Yep. So his son was the Tuskegee Air, was over it. He set the standard of excellence, the standard of what we talked about before. Don't get bitter, get better. You're going to
Right.
have situations and disappointment, but how do you handle it? How do you help that take that to launch you higher? And that's
Right.
what they did. And so we're always talking about generational curses. I know you know that because we're gonna always, but generational curses. But look at what his dad did in flipping the switch of the generational curse.
Yeah.
And what's the chances of one guy being the first general in one service and your son goes and be the first general in the other service?
True. So, with the things that they have done, how have their experiences transitioned into you and the way you operate?
Is once again, it showed me about intentionality and that endurance and having that positive attitude and understand that you're going to always have things to happen in your life. But are you going to let, it's just like we talk about with the past. Are you going to let your past prevent you from getting to your future? Are you going to let tribulations pull you back? Are you going to be able to be controlled and keep your eye and then think about what you're doing is not only for you, but also for those who follow you? And I think those are the big things that I took from them is no matter what, they carried themselves with class, they carried themselves with dignity. Not that they were pushovers, don't get me wrong. You know
Mhm.
what I'm saying? Not that they were pushovers and had to, go somewhere and hide in a corner. No, they stood tall. They 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 became the professionals they needed to be for them.
Mhm.
Because one thing I could not stand before I got out is when I would hear like one of say a minority senior officer say, "Remember, you got to work harder, work harder." I said, I understand that might be a reality, but that's one I'm not taking with me anymore. I will never tell my son, you got to work harder. I say, you got to be the best you can be. That's what you go be. And if that can't be accepted, then guess what? Walk away and go be the best you somewhere else. But this
Right.
whole work harder philosophy thing, I'm
Mhm.
done with that one. I put that one away. That's a 60s thing that I'm not taking with me anymore. But getting back to it, they understood that you had to deal with tribulations and they stepped up and they carried themselves in a way that they showed even during a time of hardship and challenges, they still made it to that level.
So, how has their legacies impacted your leadership style?
Is and they kind of go back to what I was saying before about that time when I was angry and I'm gonna tell him.
Hmm.
You see what I'm saying?
Hmm.
And then I had to think to myself, how many times did they get smacked over the head, or was in the academy for a junior, Benjamin O. Davis, and the thing he was like isolated. I think he was like only the second. He was the second African American to go to the academy, and
Hmm.
they just totally isolated him out and all those things. Think about all the emotion and anger and everything that was probably built up into him. But he thought about the bigger mission,
Yeah.
and then that's what kept going through my head. What's the bigger mission? And then I'm gonna tell you, for being a Christian, it's like a three-dimensional world because you're dealing with the world, you're dealing with your flesh that want to tear some stuff up. Let's be honest. Don't
Hmm.
be pretending like, oh, that means, I'm sitting there, oh, with Fred Hammond playing 24/7. No. And then you also want to understand that God is sovereign. So when you don't get your way, you got to go, okay, but then you got to understand that might have meant that he didn't mean for you to have that when you wanted it. You see
Hmm.
what I'm saying? So then you dealing with all those kind of emotion because that's all required for your growth.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's
So, if you could ask them one question today, what would you ask them?
how did you have the self-control? How I would have told him, I said, Mr. King can't even hardly hold it together if somebody cut in front of him with their car. He'd be out there blowing and we'd be there, caught him on his podcast. So how did you have the self-control to go through what you did? Were you thinking of the future, or what you were doing? Did you feel that it was a calling that was bigger than you?
So, in closing, what are some of the things you'd like to leave with our audience, including how they can connect with you on socials or maybe going to check out your website? What are some of the things you'd like for them to know?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, so if you go on LinkedIn, Dwayne Whiteside, and I'll tell you what's so amazing, all the connections I've gotten has been from LinkedIn, even with you. From I write usually as the Lord leads me, I write posts and I put posts on there, and I'll tell you, you would be amazed at the number of people who will come and I don't care if it's one person who looks at it. I don't care if it's two. I don't care whatever it is. I sit and I really think, God, what is it that you want me to say? How can I encourage somebody? How can I do it? And I'm gonna tell you, I will go down to the Quantico or the base or somewhere, and I've even had general officers to come up to me and say, "Hey, I read your posts." I've had people who I don't even know walk up to me and say, "Hey, I don't know you, but hey, I read your post, man. Thank you." Whatever it is. So LinkedIn, I'll try to stay active on there, and I try to keep it business. But I'm gonna wrap my business and who I am, and who I am is a committed believer because he's been faithful to me.
Right.
And but the biggest thing I would say that I learned is learn how not to be too hard on yourself. I used to be extremely hard on myself. I could give grace to everybody else, but for me, to myself, would just, I can remember I was a colonel with like years of experience. I mean, had been in command, been to the Pentagon and all this, and I went to sit on a promotion board and almost had a panic attack. And I was like, what is going on here? And I can remember hearing his voice inside saying, you're too hard on yourself. And I had to learn how, you got to learn how to back up and then understand life isn't about being miserable. And when you die, there's not this big boogeyman sitting there waiting to tell you everything you did wrong when you were down here, because that's not the way it is. Is that we have a God that loves you, that you are special, you are fearfully and wonderfully made, that you are he desires to spend eternity with you, and he has showed us mercy and grace. So stop being too hard on yourself. You know what I'm saying? And then understand that you're not trying to win a Nobel Prize, peace prize. What we're trying to do is be in a relationship with someone who wants to see you be the best you that he created you to be. So stop thinking you trying to win a gold medal running for the Olympics or something. Be faithful and be who you are created to be. That's what I would say.
Well, I want to thank you again, Colonel, for your time. And, it was an honor to have you on the show. And we definitely got to have you back because I wasn't able to get through all of the questions, but we hit the majority of them. I want to thank all of you also that were out there that's watching the show. For those of you that are looking to get the message is what we started out with leadership is when I say it's about building communities, I want you all to understand that when we talking about building your communities, this is where you guys, there's one individual, maybe two individuals, get together to form that team that the Colonel mentioned. Form that team, create the mission, and then execute. But the thing is that the Colonel mentioned as well is you got to be consistent, because consistency continues to make the foundation to where, as strong as the foundation is, you can build up as high as you want to build. Together, you're strong. Divided, you won't last. But what we all need to do is we all got to start somewhere, and now is better than any time ever that we build as a team, as a unit. We unify as a community and stay strong. Together, there's no force that can stop us. Divided, we won't last. So I say, let's work together as a team. Let's make this mission be what it's supposed to be. And let's be the outstanding individuals and people and units and groups of people that we are supposed to be, by supporting each other, loving each other, building each other, and staying strong and focused. Because if we got vision, we've got everything. No vision, we can't see anything. So now, let's work. I want to thank you, Colonel, again. And I want to thank everybody for watching. Those of you that are watching on the YouTube channel, if you have not yet subscribed to the channel and got the notifications, I'm asking you to please support us by subscribing to the YouTube channel and hitting the notifications button, where you can get each and every show live when it goes live. You'll get that notification that'll say the show goes live at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All you have to do is click it and you'll be able to watch it. You can also go to the channel and you'll be able to watch all of the previous recorded shows and get that motivation that we are inspiring to have and to put out here on America in Black and White. So I want to thank you all again. Have a great evening. We have a great show for you again tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And again, I ask you, please listen and watch the show, because all of the conversations that you will be watching in all of those previous recorded shows, we are doing that one thing that is strong and that's powerful. We are coloring these conversations on America's canvas only to build what we're supposed to build. You all have a great evening, and we will see you tomorrow night. Have a good evening.